Tak posúvame sa v našej diskusii a ja v tomto paneli vítam, začím dámou, nemáme ich dnes veľa, pani Vieru Výtvarovú, Country Managing Partner v PwC. Vítajte pána Martina Fenčáka, výkonného riaditeľa spoločnosti Peikko Slovakia a pána René Popika, CEO of Reavis Slovakia.
Please be welcome.
Vítajte u nás. No, je zjavné, že
it's quite obvious that you two gentlemen are representing the, let's say, the real economy, let's call it. HB Reavis, I don't need to introduce you. HB Reavis is the leading Slovak developer operating in several Central European countries, but also in London and Berlin. And Peikko perhaps is not as large or as known, but it's a family company from Lahti, Finland, established in 1965, and it's been doing business in Slovakia for 12 years. And maybe you will tell us in detail what exactly the company does, so that our viewers know better. But let me start with a different question. What was it that changed in your professional life since the beginning of the year? Mr. Popik, you can start. Well, every one of us lives in a dynamic era, and we all perceive many changes, a number of paradigms that have been set paradigms that suddenly changed or moved or shifted. So what we perceive and what we are witnessing is basically the perspective of taking decisions, the perspective of how companies decide, how companies are, or how courageous, how bold companies are in taking steps. Of course, we see change in paradigm in how companies are working. Many companies switched to home office regime during the lockdown, and a number of these people still work from home. This is a major change in how companies perceive their operation from macro perspective. I see a rise of certain deglobalization. Companies are starting to think about the risk related to global operation, or how to mitigate those risks. Now they look more for regional or even local solutions. And also we see that companies are looking much more, we see acceleration of implementation of digitalization or digital solutions in general. And in the ways how to make work more digital, to put very simply. So there are new perspectives opening for companies, how to be more effective and how to manage costs, how to be more digital. Mr. Fenčák, maybe you can briefly introduce your company, and then of course you can answer the same question. The question was, what changed most dramatically in your professional life since early 2020? Well, we are a manufacturer of steel constructions for residential building, non-residential building, or engineering construction. And companies like HB Reavis are our customers. So mostly we supply developers or construction companies, well, anyone who's building a residential building or office building or hospital or school, etc. And since most recent years we've been quite busy with expansion because there was a big demand for our technology. This year we've basically planned a very ambitious growth across a number of European markets, including Slovakia. And I need to say that apart from 2 months of April and May, where there was a natural slowdown of the economy because of what happened, apart from that, we didn't register any major decline in turnovers or decline in our activity. Since I represent a relatively conservative or traditional manufacturing business. Now, we process steel that the people must be in those. They must be physically present at the plant, and someone needs to transform, so someone needs to pack and transport the steel to the construction. So basically, we weren't very much impacted by the crisis. It's quite possible that our industry will be influenced in the upcoming months. But if companies, developers, they are already building something, they need to finish those buildings, they need to sell those buildings or rent those buildings. So in the second quarter, we even extended our manufacturing capacities. Oh, really, that's good news, despite what we've heard about the construction sector as one of the victims of the crisis. You seem to be quite optimistic. You sound more optimistic, and we'll of course talk about the future. But now I'd like to ask Věra, Věra, can you tell us how the world of business in PwC changed in comparison to early 2020? Well, I think this is a great thing that I don't have to start with myself as a person, but I'll take advantage of those fresh data from Slovak CEOs. So let me just very briefly summarize what they say, what has changed. What is very interesting, in the original survey at the end of 2019 and beginning of 2020, Slovak CEOs expected crisis and expected large recession, and they expected it to be very soon. It's incredible how big number of Slovak and global CEOs did expect this crisis. They weren't, of course, able to say what will cause the crisis, but the world will be different and that we will fall into recession. It was basically hanging in the air. On the other hand, if I use this as a leeway for a couple of months later, the pandemics came, a number of things changed for a number of companies. Companies and people had to learn to work differently. Customer behavior shifted dramatically. Companies need to be much more careful about the supply chains and the health of the employees and the health of the other employees in supply chains. They need to be checking their cash flow, generate enough cash, etc., etc. And across all, and despite of all of these things, we conducted this next survey in September. We were very nicely surprised by how convinced Slovak CEOs are that they're going to manage this crisis. They have very strong teams, they are very well prepared when it comes to processes, they're very well prepared when it comes to technology. The rate of optimism was shocking. Yes, it was a very big surprise how optimistic Slovak companies are, and perhaps it's basically measuring of the sentiment, which is a momentary figure, and it's relative. So I believe that CEOs think that the economy has already been at the bottom. It already hit the bottom, and it's leaping back again. What we also didn't expect, that the number of CEOs, I think 2/3 of CEOs, say that they don't want to stop the investments they had planned, which is very important for the ecosystem of business. On the other hand, we noticed when it comes to the ability to generate new types of income, whether it's new products or new services, the CEOs admit that in the times of uncertainty this is much more difficult. And there was one more category which was very interesting. It was already showing in the global studies that we did in the early 2020, before Corona, and it was the importance of technology or digital preparedness for the companies. Our analysts even tried to set up a correlation between the digital preparedness and the success of the company itself, and it turned out again. So the companies that were digitally more mature, that were more digitally prepared, were much more successful in terms of coping with the crisis. And Slovak CEOs evaluate this area, the digital preparedness of their companies, also very highly. when I compare Slovakia to other surveys from other countries, for example, the EMD Institute in Switzerland evaluating 63 countries, Slovakia wasn't doing good at all. Slovakia was number 50 out of 63 countries. Quite clearly the worst results from the whole V4 countries. So it's good that the CEOs perceive the necessity for this step to prepare the population for the digital revolution. Mr. Popik, you mentioned this also, that the office life is also now full of digitalization, and the pandemic certainly accelerated this development. Offices are closed, minimum people sitting in the office, everybody home office. Everybody working from home. So, what happened in your offices in Slovakia? Try to describe this. Well, in principle, what we've noticed was, of course, it depends on the type of company and how well the company was prepared, how their technology was developed, and how their processes were ready for remote work models. But talking about our company, we switched to this remote operation or online operation very easily, because for quite some time now we had been working like that. As you mentioned, in a number of countries, our colleagues are used to participate in virtual meetings and conferences, and we have routines like that. So this switch was relatively smooth for us. And I believe every company needs, or every company understands that they have to cope with this reality and expect potential next waves of the pandemics. And when this becomes a standard thing, they will have to learn operating in digital environment. They have to improve digital skills of their people. They need to make sure that what types of work can be done remotely, what type of work must be performed in the office. I mean, offices are certainly not going to be, they're not going to disappear. They might be going to be transformed into spaces which will be more supportive for creative work, places where you can build corporate culture, and then there will be types of work that you can do remotely from home, and people will be more autonomous. And with time, this will slightly shift towards artificial intelligence, perhaps. So this is a shift that we are perceiving to be happening. And companies will need more flexibility. So if you provide companies with flexibility, if you can react quickly to changing needs and requirements, then you can succeed. So I believe companies will be investing more and more into digitalization and automation and flexibility, so that they can be honing the digital skills of their staff. So, in your case, you not only talk about people in the office or people at home, but you also have people in the field who are working on constructions, right? So that's a different story. Of course, when we are building, when you are looking at the construction processes, we reacted, as we have already mentioned, we reacted in terms of minimizing the risks in relation to the infection. So we've introduced some security sanitation measures. We divided the critical teams into Team A and Team B. So we perhaps changed the way of management of the construction site. But so far, robots will not build these buildings, so it's going to be much more conservative, so far at least. And it will be about how to make sure that your supply chain, how to manage your supply chain and motivate your supply chain so that they do not fall out of that chain, so that the whole process is as smooth as before, and to avoid any potential trouble caused by local lockdowns in some countries or regions. Well, despite the fact you have to take business decisions like postponing of opening of the shopping station and bus terminal. Yes, of course, this was related to the situation with this, in relation to the slowdown of the construction during spring. And naturally, the most heavily impacted sector, you can see this daily, in the media is the retail sector, and as you know, shopping center is open in specific periods. It's either spring or autumn, and with respect to the things that happened, it was the obvious step to postpone the opening and to get ready for the opening with 10 months delay, because opening in spring would mean for many retailers they would have to feed their investment in summer. And in the survey organized by PwC, capex investments are one of the key areas which companies considered most heavily. So the retailers needed to set up their business plan reflecting the current situation, so that they can prepare well. Because during summer, you just don't generate enough cash. I mean, apart from really large players. So we need to take into account the possibilities of all our partners in retail. And one more thing, this gave us some space for even further improve the shopping center, to link it with more digital solutions and new technologies, so that we can support our partners in retail. So is it something that the future tenants look at? You mean digital features? Yes, of course, it certainly does. Because one part of retail has moved into online digital area, and it was much faster than originally expected. So retailers see that they need to find some symbiosis, some smart symbiosis between online sale and offline or bricks and mortar sale, and at the same time they see that technology will help them to better address their offer. And if we can work with various applications and we have various loyalty schemes, we can talk, or we can approach specific customers with very direct information about the specific possibilities and alternatives. So there's a great number of alternatives. I mean, it's some sort of terra incognita, if you know what I mean, but we're working on it. Mr. Fenčák, you said that you posted on a very brief downturn in your business, and then it went running again. But what measures you had to adopt? Yeah, I just add to Mr. Popik. We are a relatively small player in the construction sector. We are not a large company. Basically, obviously I don't have to go into details about the anti-epidemic measures, I mean sanitation, etc. Like everybody did that. So measuring of temperature and breaks between the shifts, and testing of our employees. And those who could stay at home, of course, remained at home basically for overnight. And what helped us was the fact that we had very much prepared IT infrastructure, so we even sent the project engineers and constructors. They just packed their notebooks with 2 or 3 monitors, and they went home. And there was no contingency plan, but since we are a global company, we operate in 30 markets. We have 11 manufacturing plants all around the world, so we are connected digitally already, and this connection works, and the preparedness of the IT infrastructure enabled us to get into online, to go into online. I mean, it's a challenge. It's not simple to manage virtual teams unless you are trained or you have large experience. But I dare to say that we are doing fine. We are managing these challenges successfully. In terms of keeping of the deadlines and manufacturing in general, with the exception of a short-term break in the supply chain, because certain components didn't arrive from Lombardy, from Italy, because of lockdown. Except for this, we had no major issues, because we are working with some sort of buffer. We always have some reserve, so our final and customers didn't even feel any major issues. So in our case, we weren't very much impacted by COVID-19. Vera, looking at the survey and from what you know from your clients, how was their reaction to the pandemic situation, depending on the respective industries? We already heard about various models of working, from switching the whole company into home office, which was our case in PwC, or division of teams, or very careful monitoring of employees' health when you are a construction company or when you have blue-collar workers, for example. I can share our experience. PwC moved 100% of the company into home office from one day to another. It's, of course, it's no thing for which we had been preparing, even though there are people who are used to work from remote locations, but we also had to ask our clients for cooperation, because suddenly the whole cooperation, whole sharing of data suddenly went digital. So we very much appreciated the market. The clients were very welcoming and understanding and pragmatic. And when it comes to PwC business, I can tell you how it is being transformed in this COVID era. You can see that some types of services are developing as you would expect in a crisis, just like we experienced in the most recent crisis. The mergers and acquisitions are much slower. Of course, there are large predators in the market who invest in any time and they see crisis as an opportunity. But there are a number of companies that are rather in the sit-and-wait mode, and in summer the investment activity slowed down, then it increased. Now it's more quiet. So, on the other hand, services related to improvement of processes and optimization and reorganization of companies is there, and also starting insolvencies. These are growing. Unfortunately, also insolvencies, and a quite new type of service that is very prospering from the perspective of our business is everything related to digitalization of companies. We've already mentioned this. We see that companies, perhaps mostly financial companies, banks, insurance companies, leasing companies, understand that if they are not ready to cope with the crisis in the digital field, they will be losers. So these companies are very agile, and our teams are very active in assisting our clients in this sector. You mentioned that 100% went to home office from one day to another. Can you imagine operating like this forever, or for long term? Or do you agree that these creative activities require meeting of people in the office? Yes, technically I can imagine, but I don't want to see this in the long term. Just because of the creativity, and I think that we are people business. People talk to people, and I believe that we need to maintain certain balance. We want to remind this to our people. For our people it's very comfortable. The young generation like this. And it did rationalize certain processes, yes. So we could say that economically it's fine, but I personally think that this cannot work in the long term. It's not okay to be working remotely. We need to deal with our young people. We need to educate and help develop our talent, to train them or to coach them. This IT world is not enough for this, and we also need interaction with our clients. And it's the same modus operandi. I can imagine it, but still I perceive it as a sub-optimum solution in the long term. And I believe our clients, they call us and they want us to talk with them, and they like to share our observations from business because we have experience across a number of sectors, and this sharing is very important with our clients. And I think that this IT mode is not ideal for a long-term operation. Nevertheless, Mr. Popik, there's a question from Slido. How the rise of home office will influence the Slovak market with office space? Will companies rent smaller office areas? What's your experience so far? What is your expectation? Well, we see that majority of companies are reconsidering or reevaluating the need for space, I mean the need for the size of the space, because at the moment they are in testing mode, how well they manage to operate from home office, right? So home office as such will become an important part of new companies, or of new companies' life, or new corporate life. But as I said, I don't believe that it will dominate. I mean, statistically, based on what your survey also confirmed, that 8% of companies are thinking about reduction of their office area. So it may end up with 10%, 15 to 20%. Let's be realistic. Let's be consistent. So up to 20% companies will reduce their office space. But on the other hand, there are new standards, new standards of social interaction. So also the design of spaces will be changing. So the tables have to be larger, or 120 centimeters tables are just too small. It's not enough for keeping social distancing. So this is an essential measure. Yeah? Then also the way how the companies want to interact, how the companies want to build a corporate culture, what sort of identity they want to give to their space. So office, home office, it very much depends on the type of company, but in general, from our perspective, I think that home office is not going to be as significant as we might believe today, because human interaction cannot be replaced, and companies that want to grow, and companies that want to have interaction with across all the employees, well, I mean, they will need office for sure. You're using future tense, but isn't this happening already? What is your experience with your clients? Do you meet clients and they say that the offices must look different now? And well, we are starting to register this. It's not massive yet. We're starting to register. We have this service called Origamo, which is trying to cover this agenda. And we want to make sure that we understand clients' needs and how to put together the office space and the organization to ensure that the teams that need to operate together can meet physically, and the teams that do not have to necessarily meet together, and that those who can be working remotely can remain working remotely. So yes, there are some changes now, there is a new trend, but on the other hand, also the requirement for the space itself is changing. Of course, there are some sanitation requirements, and to a great degree there's discussion about technological solutions, because another service we offer is called Biosia, and it's based on monitoring and managing the space in terms of its quality and its usage. I mean, I'm talking about the humidity, the CO2 level, the temperature, which teams are meeting, and last but not least, the service can track interactions between people in the company, which is a hot topic today, because it can identify, we have personal experience, can identify situations where there's a person who was possibly in contact with a person who was positively tested for COVID-19, so the system can very quickly identify who interacted with whom, and people can immediately be informed that you've been in interaction with a positively tested person, which totally turns away the position of the technology in relation to me, because people will understand that the technology can help them to help them control their health. So perhaps people will be more willing to interact with this technology. Are clients ready to pay some premium prices for such services, or Or do companies believe that they are in the they have the upper hand now because of the situation in the market? Well, it depends on the market. It depends on the client. We have experience from Budapest. We have a large client who has, before COVID, he requested these solutions, and now they're very happy that they purchased these solutions. The more sophisticated clients see that this is some sort of benefit, and they see that the office as a working space is still an HR tool. It's an HR instrument, not only to attract new talent, but also to maintain health. Let's look at the Slido. Banks say that the crisis will be felt fully after New Year. What's in your segment? You suggested there might be something coming. Yes, of course, we can already see, as I said at the beginning, the construction market has some sort of momentum. There's certain hysteresis. So there's momentum, and we see that the number of newly priced projects is getting smaller or more than we had expected. So the requests for quotations are not there's not so many requests for quotations, RFQs. So we expect some slowdown in the market. How we are getting ready for this? Yes, we have it's general preparedness of a responsible manager. I mean, already in spring we prepared various crisis scenarios, sort of what-if scenarios. What if we fall 20%, 30%, 40%? So what we're going to do. So we have contingency plans. If they need to be implemented, we will implement them, but of course we'll do everything so that we don't have to implement them. Okay, now all three of you, please, very briefly, all of those things that you've experienced this year, and change your business, what will remain here when the world's going to be okay, back to normal? Well, I believe that the sanitation standards, safety standards that we've implemented, I think they will become a standard routine, and the related processes. And what will remain here for sure is the perspective of companies who will require more flexibility, which will be related to this unwillingness for capex experience. So they will look for the highest added value, what I can manage best with my activity, what's my biggest sort of push, and the other things will be sort of offset, and they will keep it in a flexible regime. So freelancing will be used much more, I think. There will be more flexible business model in terms of office space rentals, and maybe there will be some new instruments in terms of banking services. I believe this is true. Yeah, I think we are not going to return to this normal pre-COVID. There's a new normal, you know, whether it's about sanitation, habits, or remote work, working from home, or investments more into the IT infrastructure rather than other capex investments. I believe this is the new normal that we are about to face. On our behalf, I say that we believe that this pandemic era will trigger some change in the Slovak construction industry. Perhaps we will move away from the traditional construction technology to modular systems, to greater automation, and the construction itself will be more modular, so you will not need so many people in the construction site. So we believe that this will be triggered by the crisis. Věra, what about your opinion? I believe that employers will respect home office as a regular alternative for performing of work. There will be much more understanding for home office, and also there will be much more respect to the fact that the companies need to digitalize themselves. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We will continue after a short break with a short panel presenting the result of CEO survey. Thank you very much. Stay.
Volkswagen.